Ned, I think consciousness is really important. What do I do with some very smart philosophers who tell me that consciousness is an illusion?
Well, my recommendation is to realize, first of all, that there are some casts of mind that want to regard anything that they don't know how to understand in their favorite way as an illusion. I think the thing to realize about consciousness is there are some very difficult problems. One is what's often called the hard problem of consciousness. That's David Chalmers' term. Earlier than Chalmers, it was called the explanatory gap by Joe Levine. That is the problem of how it is that the neural basis of a conscious experience is the neural basis of that experience as opposed to some other experience or no experience at all. That is a problem we do not now know how to solve at all. There's another problem I call the harder problem, which is the problem of other minds, basically. It's a problem of how we could tell what would make it the case that a creature made of very different material from us, made in a different way, like the famous Commander Data of the Star Trek series, how we would know whether that creature is conscious. These are very tough problems, but they're not problems that should make you think consciousness doesn't exist or that it's an illusion. Dan Dennett wants to say that really that there's nothing to consciousness other than a certain kind of function. But I think that what's important in understanding a hard phenomenon like consciousness is understanding what you know and what you don't know, and not regarding what you don't know how to explain as therefore illusory.
Well, he would say that we have these so-called multiple drafts, that consciousness is sort of fame in the brain, that whatever aspect of our sensory or thought processes gains priority for the moment has the illusion of consciousness, but you really have all these parallel things going on, and that is all quite natural and normal, and that we have imbued this activity with this mystical consciousness idea as a kind of a cultural construct.
So what he calls fame in the brain is what I call access consciousness, which is just one kind of consciousness. It's the kind of consciousness, it's the aspect of consciousness that plays a role in one's cognitive life, thinking, noticing, etc. What he leaves out is what I call phenomenal consciousness, what it's like to experience red as opposed to experience green. A familiar conundrum may be useful to explain it, the inverted spectrum, the possibility that things we both agree are green look to you the way things we both agree are red look to me. Okay, we can all understand that. Children can understand it. My daughter at age 7, when I first mentioned this to her, said, that explains why some people don't have the favorite color of purple. Really, everybody's favorite color is purple. But for some people, they just call it some other name because their spectra are inverted. So we all understand this idea. There's no way it's an illusion. What we have to do is we have to just clearly distinguish the cognitive aspects of consciousness from the basic biological phenomenal aspects.
The argument to your argument says that what you're doing is artificially inflating the concept of consciousness, inflating a difference in degree so that you now imagine a difference in kind.
Right. Well, if you look at differences of degree, we could think about people, for example, who see to one degree or another. And one extreme are people who see perfectly. Another extreme are people who are so-called legally blind. That is, they can just distinguish a few shades of light and dark. But that difference of degree is very different from what's phenomenal. And a good example to illustrate that is the phenomenon of blind sight. This is a completely unconscious kind of visual detection. Someone who has the very back of the brain visual area, part of it destroyed. It's called area V1 in the back of the head, the first cortical area. Some people who've had those areas destroyed can nonetheless distinguish an X from an O or up from sideways in their blind field. If you ask them what they see, they say, I don't see anything. You ask them to guess, was it an X or an O? They can guess almost perfectly.
But they still think it's a guess.
They still think it's a guess. One of those patients had far better discrimination in his blind field, where there was no consciousness, than in his sighted field, which was on the order of legally blind. So the difference of degree is a difference in phenomenology, not a difference in detection or acuity. So I think Dennett is just wrong. The difference of degree in phenomenology is one that is quite orthogonal, different from the difference in accuracy, which doesn't go together with phenomenology.
But wouldn't that same description of these differences show that as we see different kinds of brain injury and radically different kinds of effects on consciousness and perception, indeed give credence to this multiple draft idea, because you have all these different kinds of systems and inputs, and if one or two get destroyed, you see odd results. So doesn't that actually support that view?
Well, the interesting thing is that some of those systems that you describe are conscious and other ones are unconscious. A dramatic example is the fact that all humans and all higher primates have two different visual systems. This was basically discovered in this form by two neuroscientists, Mel Goodale and David Milner. What they were able to show was that there's a system they call a dorsal system at the top of the head that is oriented around action, towards planning, towards controlling your visually guided action, but is unconscious. And another system, the ventral system, that is complete down in the lower part, goes from the back of the head into the side of the head, that is a conscious system but doesn't have a direct control of action. So we have two different systems that do two different things. Maybe a way to see the system is to notice that there are different brain injuries that have different effects. Mm-hmm. Somebody who has the top action-oriented system destroyed can see things perfectly, in the sense of conscious vision, but can't act towards them. For example, if you have a mail slot that can be tilted, the person can't insert a card into the mail slot. They're completely a chance on that. Whereas the other injury, which is a sad injury, there's a famous patient known as DF. It's called visual form agnosia. She can post that card perfectly in the slot, but if you ask her what angle the slot is, she doesn't even see it. She doesn't know. But she can act towards it perfectly. So some of those systems that Dennett is talking about in multiple drafts, some of those systems are conscious and some are unconscious, which shows that the idea of multiple drafts doesn't capture the essence of consciousness.
So what then can we say about consciousness being an illusion? And what are the implications in either direction, if it is an illusion or if it's not an illusion? What follows?
Well, if it is an illusion in the way that Dennett thinks, then there is no hard problem of consciousness. There is no harder problem of consciousness, and I described no problem of how we would tell whether commander data is conscious. We just look at the behavior and the cognitive processes that produce it. Dennett is basically a behaviorist. He was taught by the famous philosopher Gilbert Ryle, who's an out-and-out behaviorist. Dennett sometimes allows that he is. If consciousness is an illusion in that way, then there is no difficult problem of consciousness. It's just a matter of doing what Chalmers calls the easy problems, which is studying the function of consciousness. On the other hand, if consciousness is not an illusion, as I think, and some other philosophers and scientists think, then it's really a matter of trying to work on those functions with an eye towards how we might solve these very difficult problems. My advice to any scientist who wants to win the Nobel Prize in thinking about consciousness, it's better to recognize what you don't know and not call consciousness an illusion.